let me start by saying that OECD had an interest in this area of open educational resources because, as you may imagine, our main customers are governments in OECD areas, the 30 governments of the most developed countries around the world. And those include most European countries, North America and Mexico, and as well as Australia and South Korea and Japan, among others. So why OECD is really putting an emphasis on open educational resources, and as you will see later, why OECD is endorsing its use in higher education. Well, first of all, because OECD pays a lot of attention, or has been paying a lot of attention in the last years to higher education and its role in the economic development. And we found that open educational resources represented a sort of a paradox. On the one hand, we see that in many OECD countries there is a growing competition, and you could easily say that many top higher education institutions worldwide are competing to attract the best students. Now, in this context, one may think that knowledge and learning resources are one of the most important, not necessarily the most important one, but one of the most important assets in this competition. Well, but you see that, you have some anecdotal evidence showing that an increasing number of individuals and also some institutions, and I insist on that, a number of individuals and maybe far more less institutions are doing their best in order not only to produce new content, but also to share it for free. So there is some kind of paradox. In this context, OECD received a grant from the Hewlett Foundation in the United States in order to analyze why this was happening, who were the main players, and what could be the implications, especially for institutions, for governments, as well as at international level. Now, in this context, there's something wrong here, but it doesn't matter. In this context, we produced a report whose title is Giving Knowledge for Free, and we really run into trouble inside OECD, because how can you charge for a report? We normally charge 24 euros or something like that for this kind of reports. How can you charge for a report which is in the title, in a way, endorsing the idea that you should be giving knowledge for free? So it was the first time in the OECD that we decided to have a PDF, which is actually not following any of the Creative Commons licenses, but at least you can download it for free, which is a big move for an institution like OECD, or you can still buy it, a bit like my predecessor has said, paying quite substantial price for it. Now, I'm going just to run into some of the main conclusions of this report, and I would like very much to announce that everything going well, OECD will be running a second round of this study later next year in order to see how the movement has evolved and how governments and institutions have been responding to that. Now, you can look for even some translations of this report, also available for free in our webpage. And if you are really interested in that, just come to see me and I can give you more details about that. Now, the contents of this very short presentation are going to be the following. First of all, what are OER according to OECD, which is not really, we are just studying this, so we started by defining what we would consider to be OER. It's not that I would be claiming that this is the definition of OER, just having a common sense of what we had at the beginning. Now, the second is, what issues do OER pose to higher education institutions? And the third one is, what are the policy implications? Now, when it comes to the idea of defining OER, we took, I would say, a very wide approach. Our definition is, I think, in principle, quite clear. It's teaching, learning, but also research resources that reside in the public domain. So we didn't look very much for the situation regarding IPR, because that would probably reduce very much the scope of the study, and have been released under some kind of open licensing. I have to say that in most of the cases we surveyed, there was no reference to any kind of license. So many university academics believe that simply because they are uploading a PDF or a PowerPoint file or whatever, or a text, they are already doing something in the area of open educational resources. And most academics do not know exactly the complexities of IPR and open licenses. This is really a major point. The second is that in our definition, we not only included the area of content, which is probably the most popular one and the one which really has made major progress in the last years. We thought that it would be also interesting to consider, for our purposes, the tools used either to produce these resources or to use them. For example, e-learning platforms, and I'm not going to mention the most important ones because you are quite aware of that, but also the standards in order to avoid the kind of incompatibility issues that sometimes emerge and are so important. So our definition is quite, I would say, quite comprehensive. It might be not suitable to the purposes of your institutions. Now, we ran a small survey. I insist that this was done in 2006, so it's actually quite outdated, I would say, even if it's only 1.5 years after. And you will see that when it comes to the type of content produced, most of the respondents to our survey said that they were rather in favor of producing learning objects instead of sharing full courses, or even maybe sometimes even to a higher degree parts of courses. So it is really true, as it has already been said, that most of the OER community is producing and sharing learning objects or learning resources that, with the idea that they are going to be reused in the context of new courses or new programs. Now, when it comes to the type of content used, you will see that in many cases, and the picture is completely different if we are talking about OECD countries or developing countries. In OECD countries, most users of OER produced by others tend to take advantage only of learning resources as objects. While if we go to developing countries, you will realize immediately that there is a strong preference for full courses or in parts, substantial parts of courses. This raises a very important issue regarding the balance between the developed and developing countries, because when it comes to OER, there are also issues extremely important regarding, for example, cultural and language dominance, and they have to be raised as well. So who in the world is producing OER, and who in the world is using OER? And what are the values, and what are, in a way, the visions of the world that are embedded into those learning objects? That's really a tough question. There are a number of new projects coming up, so you know many of them. But what I wanted to show here is that immediately after we finished our study, well, institutions started to use new platforms. For example, I found that one, which is mostly uploading videos of lectures that can be easily used anywhere, anytime, anywhere. Now, our mapping of OER providers allowed us to, in a way, to have a two-dimensional approach. On the one hand, you will see that there are some examples, including, for example, connections, where you can find big providers which, in a way, are in between institutions and community. The same applies to other areas. For example, Paris Tech, which comes from France, is rather an institutional provider, but with a very small scope. And on the other top of the scale, you will find Wikipedia, for instance, which is